In terms of graphics, music, and gameplay, Trails in the Sky has aged poorly. But great stories never go out of style. And when it comes to the game's heart, Trails in the Sky is still best in class. Trails in the Sky is a Japanese RPG set in a steampunk world with a mix of medieval and modern vibes, released in 2004 for PCs. It's the first chapter of the Trails in the Sky trilogy, and the first game in what would later become known as the Trails series of JRPGs. But it was originally sold as the 6th game in the Legend of Heroes franchise, although it features a different world and should be considered a standalone experience from the previous games. Trails in the Sky is a fairly traditional JRPG with some modern ideas. You control a party of up to 4 heroes, fight monsters in tactical turn-based battles, and explore the Kingdom of Liberl as members of the Bracer Guild, a worldwide organization of professional problem solvers. The game has had a couple of versions over the years, but sadly it's not available for any current-gen consoles, so unless you happen to have a Vita or PS3, your best bet is the worldwide Steam release from 2014. Trails in the Sky is an old game from an era of gaming that looks especially awkward today. The graphics feel dated, the game's camera can be a bit of a pain, and the character designs have a sort of discount 90s anime look to them that doesn't impress. The game also has a pretty mediocre soundtrack for a JRPG. There's some genuinely great music in Trails in the Sky, but most of it is bland, and a lot of the tracks are recycled over and over until they get kind of old. There's a massive amount of dialogue in this game, and the Steam version doesn't include the voice acting that was added for the PlayStation Vita release, so you'll have to do a lot of reading. There is a way to patch the voice work into the game if you really like to tinker, but you might find it's not worth the trouble. Trails in the Sky uses a turn-based combat system, where battles play out on a grid, kind of like a tactical RPG. Heroes and monsters are placed in a fluid turn order that's visible on the screen and is constantly readjusted depending on the actions you take in battle. Fast characters strike more often than others, certain actions take longer to recover from, and magical arts have a delay before they go off. The fundamentals of combat are super solid, and manipulating the turn order to your advantage can be a lot of fun, but fighting never reaches its full potential. The early game lacks for options to really affect the flow of combat. You don't have as much control of your character's movement as I'd expect from a tactical RPG, and you usually don't have to work very hard to win. Some of the monster extermination quests force you to think on your feet to take down your prey, and in its best moments, Sky's combat system really delivers. But for most of the game, battles can feel a bit stale. Trails in the Sky has the usual armors to equip and weapons to wield, but the heart of the game's menus is the Orbment system. Each character has their own Orbment, a clockwork device that harnesses orbal energy to produce magical effects. By inserting different kinds of quartz into the slots of the Orbment and lining them up in the right constellations, you unlock powerful magical arts to use in combat. Orbment setup can feel confusing at first, and the game's clunky menus don't exactly help. But once you get the hang of how it works, it's fun and easy. There's not a ton of depth here, but enough to keep you experimenting, and coming up with the perfect mix of quartz is deceptively fun. Aside from the two main heroes, the party is joined by a rotating cast of companions. The revolving door of different characters forces you to adapt your playstyle as you progress through the game, and a part of the charm of the story is getting to wonder who's gonna join up next. Instead of random encounters, the monsters in Trails can be seen wandering the game's dungeons and roads, although they only show up when you get very close. Catching the enemy unaware is an easy win, but you're in for a beating if you get caught from behind. So for once, there's actually good reason to slow your step while exploring. The game's dungeons are basic even by the standards of the time, and dungeon crawling only really gets interesting in the final chapter. There's no puzzles to solve and very few things to interact with, but towns and villages have a lot of charm for the primitive graphics and can be fun to explore. As members of the Bracer Guild, the heroes take on tasks from the local community as they travel through the kingdom of Liberl. Instead of a billion generic side quests, Trails in the Sky focuses on a smaller number of more meaningful stories. The tasks you complete have a genuine impact on people's lives, and even some of the main story cutscenes include mentions of things you did or did not do. Bracer tasks have deadlines based on where you are in the story, so you might have to slow down to clear them all. And while this type of mechanic usually stresses me out, the deadlines help drive home the point that these are urgent issues the citizens need help with, and that people are relying on the heroes to do their part for the common good. Trails in the Sky tells the story of Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua as they travel the kingdom of Liberl in search of her missing father. There's a mysterious relic to deal with, baffling crimes to investigate, and a dark conspiracy to uncover. But this is really the story of Joshua and Estelle. It's a classic coming-of-age story where the heroes go from clueless rookies to hardened veterans, and it's incredibly satisfying to see. Estelle and Joshua feel like best friends right from the start, and the slow burn romance between them is wholesome, heartwarming, and super fun. Trails in the Sky is one of the best told stories I've ever played. Where many JRPGs rely on coincidence and plot armor to write their stories, Sky's heroes have to actually gather information and make clever plans to earn their wins. It's a mostly grounded story with a lot of believable setups, and the villain is one of the most nuanced and well realized in all of gaming. There's a lot of long cutscenes and a ton of dialogue, and the writing can be a bit clunky at times. But some of the best moments are scenes that would have been cut from the average game, like Estelle and Joshua stopping for lunch along the way to a new town. The game does a fantastic job of building meaningful relationships between the heroes and the people they meet, and that's true even for many of the non-playable characters. Trails in the Sky isn't afraid to put the story on hold to zoom in on an intimate moment, and if the pacing can sometimes suffer, well, in this game, that's really more of a feature than a flaw. This game has some of the richest world building I've seen in a JRPG. Almost every NPC has a name, and even minor characters feel like genuine individuals going about their own lives. Every place you visit is somewhere you've heard about before you reach it. You stay long enough in each region to build fond memories, and even though you only ever set foot in the kingdom of Liberl, by the time you're done with the game, you'll be dying to know more about the Erebonian Empire and the Calvard Republic. The weakest part is probably the English translation. It's never outright bad, but the translators had to work themselves to the bone to get it done in time, and the script would have benefited from a second pass to cut the chaff and make the dialogue sing in English. The story starts kind of slow, but draws you in with great characters and superb world building, holds you in suspense that keeps you guessing until the very last moment, and builds to a breathtaking finish. And when that cliffhanger hits at the end of the game, you'll be ready to run through a wall to get to the second part. Before I go on, I just want to say if you found this valuable, I'd be super grateful if you could hit the like button and leave a quick comment, as it really helps the video reach more people. And if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing to my channel. For years, people have been telling me about the Trails series, and after blowing through this game, I finally get why. Because even though Trails in the Sky is an old game with a lot of flaws, the essential parts of the package are still as good today. Dungeons are kinda boring, battles get repetitive, and the game gets off to a pretty slow start. But it's got an awesome cast of lovable characters, a world that's worth getting lost in, and the most satisfying love story I've seen in a long time. Trails in the Sky isn't for everyone, but if you're not afraid to do a little reading, it just might be your next obsession. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.